It was a quiet evening at St. Joseph Hospital in Seattle, the kind of night where the fluorescent lights buzzed softly and the hallways felt endless. Hannah Sullivan moved through them with her usual timid grace. At 28, she was a nurse who preferred the shadows to the spotlight. Her soft brown eyes hidden behind thick glasses, her once blonde hair now dyed a muted chestnut to avoid attention. She wore a simple navy scrub, her badge clipped neatly to her chest, though the weight of her life pressed far heavier than that plastic tag. For years she had been drowning in medical debt, fighting to keep her mother alive after a diagnosis that turned their world upside down. Every paycheck went to treatments, every spare moment to worry. Tonight, though, was different. She had been asked to deliver an urgent report to the new CEO's office on the 20th floor, a task that made her stomach twist. Hannah avoided authority figures, their stern voices and sharp suits always reminding her of the past she tried to bury. The elevator ride felt eternal, each ding of the floors amplifying her nerves. She clutched the manila folder tightly, her palms damp with sweat. The report detailed patient outcomes for the quarter, critical data the CEO needed before a board meeting tomorrow. Why they picked her, she didn't know. Maybe because she stayed late, always the last to leave, her quiet dedication unnoticed until now. When the doors slid open, the 20th floor stretched before her, a world apart from the chaos of the wards below. Polished wood panels lined the walls, and a sleek reception desk sat empty. The air smelled faintly of leather and expensive cologne, a stark contrast to the antiseptic tang she knew so well. She shuffled toward the office marked Noah Caldwell, CEO, her sneakers squeaking faintly on the marble floor. Hannah paused at the door, her hand hovering over the handle. She knocked once, twice, her tap soft and hesitant. No answer came. The hum of the hospital faded, replaced by a distant sound. A faint rush of water. She frowned, tilting her head. It was coming from inside. Maybe someone left a faucet running, she thought, her practical nurse's mind kicking in. She couldn't just leave the report on the floor, not with something so important. With a deep breath, she turned the handle and stepped inside. The office was dim, lit only by a desk lamp casting long shadows over a mahogany desk and leather chair. Papers were stacked neatly, a laptop closed beside them. But that sound, the water, grew louder. Her eyes darted to a door on the right, slightly ajar, steam curling out from the gap. She approached slowly, her heart thudding. "Hello?" she called, her voice barely above a whisper. No response. She nudged the door wider, expecting to find a sink or a leak. Instead, she froze. There, under a wide glass shower in a sleek modern bathroom, stood a man. Water streamed over his broad shoulders, his dark hair slicked back, his eyes closed as he let the heat wash away the day. He was tall, muscular, unaware of her presence. Hannah's breath caught, her face flaming red. She stumbled back, the folder slipping from her hands and hitting the floor with a thud. The noise snapped his eyes open. He turned, startled, and their gazes locked for a split second, hers wide with panic, his sharp with confusion. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice deep and commanding as he grabbed a towel from a nearby rack. Hannah didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat closed up, her legs moving before her brain caught up. She spun around, bolting out of the office, the door banging shut behind her. The man, Noah Caldwell, wrapped the towel around his waist and stepped out, water dripping onto the tiles. He spotted the folder on the floor, its contents spilling out, a name scrawled on the top page. Hannah Sullivan. His brow furrowed. Something about her felt familiar, a flicker from a life he'd left behind. But she was gone, vanished into the labyrinth of the hospital, leaving only the echo of her flustered escape. Back in the stairwell, Hannah pressed herself against the wall, her chest heaving, her glasses fogged with the heat of her breath, her hands trembling. She had just walked in on the CEO. The CEO. She didn't even know his name until now, hadn't cared to learn it. All she knew was the hospital had a new boss, some big shot from a fancy company called Caldwell Innovations. And she'd seen him, all of him, in a moment she'd never forget. Her mind raced with embarrassment, but beneath it a deeper fear stirred. 6 years ago, she'd loved a man named Noah, a medical student with dreams too big for her small world. She'd walked away from him, forced out by his mother's money and threats. Could it be the same Noah? No, she told herself, that was impossible. He'd never recognize her now, not with the glasses, the hair, the years that had changed her. Still, the encounter rattled her. She didn't know Noah Caldwell was more than just a CEO. He was also Mr. Raven, a mysterious figure who had quietly paid off chunks of her mother's medical bills through a secret marriage contract she'd signed in desperation 2 years ago. She'd never met him, never heard his voice, only received cryptic letters promising help if she stayed silent. Hannah had no idea the man she'd just fled from held both her past and her present in his hands. As she slipped back to the nurse's station, vowing to avoid the 20th floor forever, Noah stood in his office, staring at her name on the report. A memory tugged at him, faint but persistent, of a shy girl who once owned his heart. He shook it off, chalking it up to coincidence, but fate, it seemed, had other plans. The next morning at St. Joseph Hospital felt heavier for Hannah Sullivan. She moved through her rounds with mechanical precision, checking charts, adjusting IVs, her mind replaying the disaster from last night. The image of Noah Caldwell under that shower haunted her, a mix of shame and dread twisting her stomach. She kept her head down, avoiding eye contact with colleagues, hoping the whole thing would fade like a bad dream. But hospitals were breeding grounds for gossip, and whispers had already started. A janitor saw her sprinting from the 20th floor, her face red as a tomato. Nurses speculated about the new CEO, a man who arrived with a reputation for brilliance and a fortune to match. Hannah prayed they wouldn't connect the dots. She just wanted to survive her shift, go home to her tiny apartment, and hug her daughter Maddie tight enough to forget. Noah Caldwell, meanwhile, sat in his office. The spilled report from Hannah still spread across his desk. He hadn't slept much, his thoughts tangled in that fleeting moment when their eyes met. She'd looked terrified, almost fragile, yet something about her stuck with him. He traced her name on the page. Hannah Sullivan, written in a hurried scrawl. It nagged at him, a ghost from 6 years ago when he was just a medical student with big dreams and a bigger heart. Back then, he'd loved a shy girl named Hannah, a nursing student who blushed at his every word. His mother, Dorothy Caldwell, had ended it, handing the girl a check and a warning to stay away from her son's future. Noah had fought it at first, but Dorothy's will was iron and Hannah disappeared without a word. He'd moved on, or so he thought, building Caldwell Innovations into a powerhouse. Now, staring at that name, doubt crept in. Could it be her? He dismissed it. Too much time had passed, and this Hannah looked different, guarded behind glasses and a new hair color. Their paths crossed again that afternoon, unavoidable in a hospital buzzing with change. Noah called a staff meeting to outline his vision, a room packed with doctors and nurses hanging on his every word. Hannah slipped in late, standing at the back, her arms crossed tight. She kept her gaze on the floor as Noah spoke about innovation, patient care, and teamwork, his voice smooth and commanding. He scanned the crowd, his eyes landing on her for a moment too long. She felt it, a jolt that made her look up, only to find him already moving on. When the meeting ended, he approached her, casual but deliberate, holding the folder she'd dropped. "You left this last night," he said, his tone neutral but his stare piercing. Hannah mumbled a thank you, snatching it and turning to leave, but he stopped her. "Wait, have we met before?" Her heart sank. "No," she lied, too quick, too sharp, and hurried away, leaving him with more questions than answers. Hannah's life was a fragile balance, and Noah's presence threatened to tip it. She had Maddie, her 5-year-old daughter, the light in her dark world. Maddie had her father's dark hair and sharp eyes, traits Hannah hid by claiming Jasper Reed, her best friend, was the dad. Jasper, a struggling musician with a kind soul, played along, no questions asked. He knew the truth, that Maddie was Noah's, conceived in a fleeting moment before Hannah vanished from his life. She'd never told Noah, couldn't, not after Dorothy's money and threats. Now, with him so close, the lie felt thinner than ever. She avoided him at work, taking extra shifts in the ER, burying herself in patients to keep him out of her head. But Noah wasn't one to let things go. He started asking about her, subtle inquiries to staff, pulling her file. He noticed her late hours, her quiet skill, and that nagging sense of familiarity he couldn't shake. Trouble brewed beyond the hospital walls, too. Lydia Morgan, Noah's fiancée, arrived in Seattle to stake her claim. She was everything Hannah wasn't. Polished, confident, dripping with wealth. Lydia had met Noah at a gala 2 years ago, charmed him with her wit and ambition, and now wore his ring like a trophy. She sensed his distraction at the hospital, his lingering glances at the mousy nurse in scrubs. "Who's that girl?" she asked one day, catching him watching Hannah adjust a patient's chart. Noah brushed it off, but Lydia's jealousy flared. She dug into Hannah's life, hiring someone to follow her, uncovering the debt, the sick mother, the little girl named Maddie. Lydia didn't know the full story, but she didn't need to. Hannah was a threat, and Lydia never lost. Dorothy Caldwell added fuel to the fire. She swept into Noah's office unannounced, her silver hair pulled tight, her voice cold as ever. "I hear you're spending time with the staff," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Keep your focus, Noah. We didn't build this empire for distractions." She didn't know Hannah yet, but her instincts prickled. Dorothy had crushed her son's youthful romance once, and she'd do it again if needed. Meanwhile, Hannah's own family tightened the noose. Walter Sullivan, her father, and Nikki Sullivan, her half-sister, saw Noah's arrival as a gold mine. Walter had abandoned Hannah and her mother years ago for a richer wife, leaving them to fend for themselves. Now, with Hannah near a CEO, he schemed. "Get close to him," he told her over a tense phone call, his voice gruff. "We need the money." Nikki chimed in, her tone venomous. "You owe us, Hannah. Don't mess this up." Hannah felt trapped, a mouse in a maze of predators. She wanted to run, to quit her job and disappear with Maddie, but the debt chained her. Every night she tucked Maddie into bed, brushing dark curls from her face, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "We'll be okay, baby," she said, her voice cracking. Maddie smiled, oblivious to the storm. At the hospital, Noah kept pushing, assigning Hannah to a project under his watch. "You're good at this," he said one day, handing her a stack of patient data. His fingers brushed hers, and she flinched, memories flooding back. She nodded, mute, and retreated. He watched her go, piecing together the puzzle. She was hiding something, someone, and he needed to know why. Across town, Lydia met with a private investigator, her nails tapping the table. "Find out everything," she ordered. "I want her gone." Dorothy, in her penthouse, called an old friend to dig into hospital staff records. Walter and Nikki plotted over cheap whiskey, dreaming of millions. And Hannah, alone in her cramped kitchen, stared at a letter from Mr. Raven, the mysterious benefactor she'd never met. "Stay the course," it read. Unsigned as always. She crumpled it, unaware that the man she feared, the man she'd seen in that shower, was the one pulling the strings. The past was closing in, and secrets, like shadows, were stretching longer by the day. The days at St. Joseph Hospital grew darker for Hannah Sullivan, each one heavier than the last. She buried herself in work, her hands steady as she changed bandages and checked vitals, but her heart trembled with a new fear. Maddie, her 5-year-old daughter, had fallen ill. It started with a fever that wouldn't break, then bruises blooming on her small arms like cruel flowers. Hannah took her to the pediatric ward after a night shift, her voice shaking as she begged a doctor to run tests. The diagnosis came like a thunderclap: hemophagocytic lymphocytosis, a rare disease that attacked Maddie's immune system. The doctor explained it in clipped tones, his words a blur of medical jargon. She needed a bone marrow transplant or cord blood from a sibling to survive. Hannah's knees buckled. She had no other children, no donor lined up, and time was slipping away. Noah Caldwell noticed the change in her. She'd been distant before, but now she was a ghost, her eyes hollow behind those glasses. He caught her in the break room one evening, staring at a cup of coffee gone cold. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. She nodded, a reflex, but her hands gripped the table too tight. He didn't push, not yet, though his suspicion about her deepened. He'd seen Maddie's picture by chance, a snapshot falling from Hannah's locker, and those eyes so like his own haunted him. He ordered discreet tests through a lab contact, comparing Maddie's records to his own DNA, but results would take days. For now, he watched Hannah, torn between the past he couldn't place and the present pulling him closer. Their worlds collided one stormy night in the pediatric ward. Maddie's fever spiked and Hannah stayed by her bedside, stroking her damp hair as machines beeped. Noah, working late, passed by and saw them through the glass. He stepped in, drawn by a force he couldn't name. "Your daughter?" he asked, his throat tight. Hannah froze, then nodded, too tired to lie. "She's sick," she whispered, tears spilling over. Noah sat beside her, silent, his presence a strange comfort. Hours passed, the storm raging outside, and exhaustion blurred the lines between them. When Maddie finally slept, Hannah slumped against him, her defenses down. He held her, his arms steady, and in that fragile moment, they kissed. It was desperate, reckless, a spark reigniting from years ago. One thing led to another, and in a quiet call room nearby, they surrendered to the pull, a night born of grief and need. Weeks later, Hannah stared at a positive pregnancy test in her bathroom, her hands shaking. Hope flickered amidst the terror. A sibling could save Maddie, the doctor had said. She hadn't planned this, hadn't wanted it, but now it was her lifeline. She kept it secret, avoiding Noah, her mind racing with guilt and possibility. Lydia Morgan, though, had eyes everywhere. She had grown obsessed with Hannah, her investigator tailing her to pharmacies, noting the prenatal vitamins. Lydia's jealousy turned vicious. She paid a nurse, a desperate woman with debts of her own, to slip an abortive drug into Hannah's water during a shift. Hannah drank it unknowingly, collapsing hours later in the ER, blood staining her scrubs. She woke to a doctor's grim face. "You lost the baby," he said. Her scream echoed through the ward, a sound of pure anguish. Maddie's hope was gone. The hospital became a battlefield. Dorothy Caldwell fell ill soon after, her heart medication swapped for a lethal counterfeit. She collapsed in Noah's office, gasping his name before slipping away. Lydia planted evidence, a vial with Hannah's fingerprints, framing her for the death. Noah found it, his world shattering. He couldn't believe Hannah would kill his mother, but the proof stared back at him. Torn, he called Jasper Reed, Hannah's friend, and asked him to bring her to a house outside Seattle. "I need to talk to her," Noah said, his voice breaking. Jasper agreed, sensing the urgency, and drove Hannah there under the guise of a favor. She arrived, pale and confused, stepping into a wood-paneled living room. Noah faced her, the vial in his hand. "Did you do this?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. She shook her head, frantic. "No, I swear." But he wouldn't listen, his grief too raw. He locked the door, not to imprison her, but to keep her safe until he could think. Hannah, though, saw it as betrayal, pounding on the wood, convinced he'd turned against her. The nightmare worsened. Nikki Sullivan, Hannah's half-sister, saw Maddie's illness as leverage. She visited the hospital, cooing at Maddie with fake sweetness. "Let's see Grandma," she said, luring the girl outside while Hannah was stuck with Noah. Nikki handed Maddie to Walter, who drove her to an abandoned warehouse on the city's edge. They called Hannah's phone, leaving a voicemail. "We've got her," Walter growled. "$10 million from your CEO, friend, or she's gone." Hannah didn't hear it, trapped in the house. Her phone dead from a drained battery. Jasper, back at the hospital, found Maddie missing and pieced it together. He raced to Noah, banging on the door. "They took her," he shouted, his face wild. "Walter and Nikki, it's a ransom." Noah's blood ran cold. He unlocked the door, facing Hannah's tear-streaked fury. "What's happening?" she demanded. Jasper explained, and her knees gave out. "My baby," she sobbed. Noah acted fast, calling his security team to track the signal, but doubt gnawed at him. He turned to Hannah, his voice low. "Is Maddie mine?" She froze, the question cutting through her haze. Jasper stepped in, his patience gone. "Yes, she's yours," he said. "Hannah didn't tell you because of Dorothy. 6 years ago, your mom paid her to leave. Maddie's the proof." Noah staggered, the truth crashing over him. He'd been Mr. Raven all along, funding Hannah's debt through a shadow identity, never knowing it tied back to his own child. Dorothy had hidden it, and he'd been blind. "I didn't know," he said, reaching for Hannah. She pulled away, her voice bitter. "You didn't trust me." The room spun with revelations, but Maddie's danger loomed larger. They had to find her, and time was running out. Lydia watched from afar, her plan unraveling. She'd meant to destroy Hannah, not spark this chaos. Her hired nurse confessed under pressure, admitting the drug and the vial. Lydia's triumph curdled into panic. Walter and Nikki huddled in the warehouse, Maddie curled in a corner, her small body shivering. Hannah clung to Jasper, her strength fraying, while Noah vowed to fix it all. The storm outside raged on, a mirror to the tempest within, as secrets broke free and lives hung in the balance. The air in the house outside Seattle hung thick with tension, a storm brewing both inside and out. Hannah Sullivan stood trembling, her eyes red from crying, as Jasper Reed's words sank in. Noah Caldwell, the man she'd loved and lost, was Maddie's father, and he'd been Mr. Raven all along, the shadow paying her debts, his face twisted with shock and guilt, but Hannah's fury burned hotter. "You didn't trust me," she said, her voice raw. "You thought I killed your mother." Noah stepped toward her, hands outstretched. "I was wrong," he said. "I didn't know about Maddie, about any of it." Jasper cut in, urgent. "We don't have time for this. They've got her." Maddie's absence was a knife in Hannah's chest, and Noah's resolve hardened. He grabbed his phone, barking orders to his security team. "Find that warehouse. Now." Hannah refused to sit still. She pushed past Noah, grabbing Jasper's car keys. "I'm going," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. Noah followed, climbing into the passenger seat as Jasper took the wheel. The drive was a blur of rain-slicked roads and flashing lights, Noah's team tracking Walter and Nikki's call to an industrial park on Seattle's outskirts. Inside the warehouse, Maddie huddled against a cold wall, her small frame shivering. Walter paced, his gruff voice snapping at Nikki. "He'd better pay," he muttered, clutching a burner phone. Nikki smirked, her nails tapping the table. "She's our ticket out of this dump." Maddie whimpered, and Nikki shot her a glare. "Quiet, kid." The rescue came fast and fierce. Noah's security team stormed the warehouse, flashlights cutting through the dark. Walter swung a rusty pipe, but a guard tackled him, pinning him to the ground. Nikki screamed, clawing at another, only to be restrained. Hannah burst in behind them, her eyes locking on Maddie. "Mommy," Maddie cried, running into her arms. Hannah held her tight, sobbing into her hair, the world fading to just the two of them. Noah watched, his heart breaking at the sight of his daughter, a child he'd never known. He knelt beside them, hesitant. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice cracking. Hannah looked up, her anger softening, but not gone. "We'll talk later," she said, standing with Maddie in her arms. Back at the hospital, Maddie was checked and stabilized, her fever down, but her condition still fragile. Noah stayed close, his mind racing. He turned his focus to Lydia Morgan, the woman who'd torn them apart. The hired nurse had cracked, spilling everything to Noah's investigators. Lydia had paid her to drug Hannah's water, causing the miscarriage, and to plant the fake vial that killed Dorothy. Evidence piled up. Bank records, text messages, a confession on tape. Noah confronted Lydia in her sleek downtown apartment, his voice cold as steel. "You took my child," he said, holding up the proof. "You killed my mother." Lydia paled, her confidence crumbling. "I didn't mean for Dorothy to die," she stammered. "I just wanted Hannah gone." Noah's jaw tightened. "You're done." He didn't stop there. Noah handed the evidence to the police, and Lydia was arrested, her name splashed across headlines as a scandal rocked Seattle. Her trial was swift, her wealth no match for the charges: manslaughter, attempted murder, conspiracy. She lost everything, her fortune seized, her reputation shredded. Hannah watched it unfold on the hospital TV, a grim satisfaction settling in her chest. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it was a start. She turned her sights on Walter and Nikki, the family who'd betrayed her. Noah had more dirt, dug up by his team. Walter's side business, a shady operation selling counterfeit drugs, had killed patients, Dorothy among them. Nikki knew, profiting off the scraps. Noah struck a deal with prosecutors, trading evidence for leniency on Maddie's kidnapping. Walter faced fraud and manslaughter charges, his empire crumbling as news stations aired his downfall. At a press conference, Noah stood behind a podium, his voice steady. "Walter Sullivan endangered lives for greed," he said, cameras flashing. "He'll answer for it." Then came the moment Hannah demanded. Walter, cornered by public shame, appeared on live TV, his face haggard. "I'm sorry," he said, his words forced but public, a humiliation broadcast to millions. Nikki's fate was quieter, but no less brutal. Her inheritance vanished with Walter's collapse, and her social circle turned their backs, leaving her isolated and broke. Hannah sat with Noah in his office days later, Maddie asleep in a cot nearby. The silence between them was heavy, years of pain and secrets laid bare. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his eyes on his daughter. Hannah sighed, her voice low. "Dorothy gave me $1 million to leave. She said I'd ruin you. When I found out about Maddie, I couldn't risk her taking her too." Noah clenched his fists, anger at his mother mixing with regret. "I should have fought harder," he said. "I let her control me." Hannah met his gaze, softer now. "You didn't know." He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. "I do now," he said, "and I'll make it right." The hospital hummed around them, a new chapter beginning. Lydia's trial loomed, Walter's sentencing neared, and Nikki faded into obscurity. Hannah felt the weight lift, piece by piece, though scars remained. She'd lost a child, nearly lost Maddie, but she'd gained something too. Noah's truth, his promise. They weren't healed, not fully, but they were together, facing the wreckage as one. Maddie stirred, her small voice calling, "Mommy!" and Hannah smiled, a flicker of hope breaking through the dark. Noah joined her, his hand brushing Maddie's cheek, a father at last. The fight wasn't over, but for now they had each other, and that was enough. The storm that had shadowed Hannah Sullivan's life began to lift, leaving a fragile calm in its wake. St. Joseph Hospital in Seattle buzzed with its usual rhythm, but for Hannah, the world felt different. Maddie's small hand rested in hers as they sat in a brightly lit recovery room, the 5-year-old's dark curls spilling over a pillow. Her fever was gone, her bruises fading, thanks to a miracle Jasper Reed had pulled off. He had spent weeks calling every contact he knew, tracking down a bone marrow donor through an international registry. The match came from a stranger in Boston, a young woman who'd signed up years ago. The transplant happened fast, a tense day of waiting that ended with the doctor's quiet nod. "She's going to be okay," he said, and Hannah's tears fell freely, relief washing over her like a tide. Noah Caldwell stood by the window, watching them with a softness he hadn't known he could feel. Maddie was his daughter, a truth that still shook him, but one he embraced fully now. He'd spent the night after her rescue poring over old photos, piecing together the years he'd missed. Hannah caught his gaze, her brown eyes steady behind her glasses. "She looks like you," she said, a faint smile breaking through. Noah crossed the room, sitting beside them. "She's got your strength," he replied, his voice low. Maddie stirred, blinking up at him. "Are you my daddy?" she asked, her words small but clear. Noah's throat tightened. "Yes, sweetheart," he said, brushing her cheek. "I am." Maddie grinned, reaching for his hand, and Hannah's heart swelled, a wound beginning to heal. They left the hospital together days later, a family pieced back from shards. Noah drove them to a quiet house on Seattle's edge, a place he'd bought months ago as Mr. Raven, intending it as a safe haven for Hannah and her mother. Now it was theirs. The living room had wide windows overlooking a garden, sunlight streaming in where shadows once ruled. Hannah's mother, frail but recovering, waited there, her smile weak but warm. "You did it," she said, hugging Maddie tight. Hannah watched, her chest lighter than it had been in years. Noah stood beside her, his presence steady. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, and she believed him. They'd lost too much to let go now. Time moved forward, stitching their lives closer. Hannah returned to work, her shifts lighter, her spirit brighter. Noah scaled back his hours at Caldwell Innovations, delegating to spend mornings with Maddie, teaching her to draw and laughing at her messy sketches. One evening, as spring warmed the city, Hannah felt a familiar flutter, a quiet hope she hadn't dared name. A test confirmed it. She was pregnant again. She told Noah over dinner, her voice trembling with joy. His eyes lit up and he pulled her close, whispering promises into her hair. "This time, we'll do it right," he said. The baby would be Maddie's sibling, a new chance after the one Lydia stole, and a bond to tie them tighter. Noah channeled their pain into something bigger. He founded Maddie's Hope, a foundation to help kids with rare diseases like hers. At the launch event, held in the hospital's atrium, he stood before a crowd of donors and doctors, Maddie on his hip. "This is for her," he said, his voice strong, "and for every family fighting to save their child." Hannah watched from the front row, pride swelling in her chest. Donations poured in, millions pledged in hours, a legacy born from their survival. Jasper played a song he'd written for Maddie, his guitar notes filling the space, a tribute to the little girl who'd brought them all together. Months later, the house filled with new sounds. Hannah gave birth to a boy, a healthy baby with Noah's sharp eyes and her gentle mouth. They named him Owen, a name meaning peace, a gift after years of war. Maddie doted on him, calling him my Owen, and giggling when he grabbed her finger. The garden bloomed with flowers Hannah planted, a splash of color against the gray of Seattle's rains. One afternoon they sat together on the porch, Owen in Noah's arms, Maddie curled against Hannah. The sky was clear, a rare break in the clouds, and they watched it in silence, a family whole at last. Hannah's mother moved in, her health fragile but stable, content to knit blankets for her grandchildren. Walter and Nikki faded from their lives, their names a distant echo. Lydia's prison sentence stretched ahead, her downfall a footnote in their story. The hospital staff still whispered about Hannah and Noah, but the gossip softened into respect. A tale of love reclaimed. Noah sold his penthouse, trading luxury for the simple chaos of family dinners and bedtime stories. He kept a photo on his desk, the four of them smiling, a reminder of what mattered. As night fell, Hannah tucked Maddie into bed, Owen asleep in his crib nearby. Noah joined her, his arm slipping around her waist. "We made it," he said, his voice a quiet marvel. She nodded, leaning into him. "We did." Outside, the city hummed, but inside it was just them, a sanctuary built from broken pieces. Maddie's hope grew, saving lives across the country, a light born from their darkest days. Hannah looked at her daughter, her son, her husband, and felt something she hadn't in years. Peace. The past was behind them, the future theirs to shape, and love, at last, had won.